Humans have always sought ways to define their personalities. According to the American Psychological Association, personality refers to the enduring characteristics and behavior that comprise a person's unique adjustments to life, including major traits, interests, drives, values, self-concepts, abilities, and emotional patterns. Throughout history, psychologists have attempted to devise methods for determining personality types, sometimes with questionable reliability. For instance, official personality assessment has its roots in the 18th and 19th centuries, during which personality was assessed with phrenology, a method centered on measuring the bumps on a human skull. However, the desire to define their personality and to fit in distinct categories existed even before then, dating back to at least Hippocrates' era in ancient Greece. This physician devised the four temperament theory, which suggests that there are four fundamental personality types, each associated with a specific bodily fluid, which are believed to govern an individual's emotional and behavioral tendencies. Over time, scientists and psychology professionals delved deeper into the subject of personality testing and have developed numerous self-questionnaires and assessments, such as the Woodworth Personal Data Sheet, the Rorschach Test, the Minnesota Multiphasic Personality Inventory, the Myers-Briggs Type Indicator, the 16 Personality Factor Questionnaire, the California Personality Inventory, the Big Five, and the Enneagram. This has led to what it is today, a still rapidly growing $500 million industry in personality testing. With the arrival of the internet, self-questionnaire personality tests have become easily accessible to anyone and increasingly common. To this day, some job interviews use personality tests for hiring decision, while matchmaking apps also utilize personality tests to determine compatibility. So, let's dive into the description of 8 of the most well-known and commonly spread personality tests of history. The first official personality test released for civilian use was the Woodworth Psychoneurotic Inventory, or Woodworth Personal Data Sheet, developed and published by Robert S. Woodworth in 1919. It was created to assess the possibility of suffering from shell shock, which is a cluster of symptoms with no apparent physiological cause that can be seen in soldiers who have faced the horrors of war. These symptoms can include limb paralysis, mutism, loss of senses, muscle spasms, stupor, dissociation, amnesia, and way more. This test was used by the Army to assess the emotional stability of the World War I soldiers and identify those at risk for shell shock. It consists of 116 yes or no questions that try to evaluate any phobia, mental illness, and neuroticism, and is scored on a scale of 0 to 100, a score of 0 indicating no neurosis, and a score of 100 indicating severe neurosis. According to the results of a potential soldier, the Army force decided whether or not the individual was fit for duty. After the WPI, personality tests started to gain in popularity worldwide. One of them is still famous today, and you might even recognize it. This test is called the Rorschach Test and was developed in 1921 by Hermann Rorschach. At the time, this test was often used to diagnose mental conditions, such as schizophrenia, but it was also a way to determine certain personality traits. Usually, the taking of this test would go as following. A person is asked to describe what they see in 10 different patches of ink, some in black and white and some with color. Then, the results are interpreted by a qualified psychologist according to many factors, such as the nature of what was interpreted, the location and size of the form located, and more. While the Rorschach test is still occasionally used today, its reliance on interpretation rather than scientific research has led to debates about its reliability for psychological assessments and diagnosis. A few years later, the Minnesota Multiphasic Personality Inventory was published. The MMPI is still today one of the most widely used psychological tests across the world. It has been developed by the neuropsychiatrist J. Charnley McKinley and the clinical psychologist Starl R. Hathaway at the University of Minnesota in 1942. The goal of this test is to evaluate the psychological state of its taker and to identify and diagnose certain underlying mental health conditions. It evaluates 10 different clinical scales, such as hypochondriasis, the exaggerated concern over one's health unsupported by medical authority, depression, which is characterized by low morale, overall dissatisfaction in life, and an absence of hope for the future, hysteria, an assortment of symptoms that can point to a variety of other mental health disorders and that can be determined by your life circumstances, psychopathic deviate, which measures social deviation, lack of acceptance of authority figures, and amorality, masculinity versus femininity, which is how much a person abides by stereotypical masculine and feminine values and roles, Paranoia, which are aspects of personality like grandiose thinking, suspicion towards other people, and rigid thinking. Psychasthenia, a person's ability to resist certain thoughts, patterns, or behaviors, like self-criticism, excessive fears, compulsions, and problems with concentration. Schizophrenia, which is reflected by bizarre thoughts, processes, and peculiar perceptions, social alienation, lack of interest, and disturbing questions of self-worth. Hypomania, an unhealthy overactivity expressed as elevated and unstable mood, excitement, and feeling of grandiosity and egocentricity. And finally, social introversion, the tendency to avoid social interactions and withdraw from them. On top of that, the test is equipped with a validity scale to help assess the accuracy of the individual's answers. It consists of the L scale, or lie scale, which detects attempts by the individual to present themselves in a better light, as any human being tends to do. The F for frequency scale, which determines if the test takers are trying to exaggerate their symptoms to appear worse than they already are. And the K, or defensiveness scale, that detects if, on the contrary, someone is underplaying their problems. Other validity scales have been added through perfection versions of the test over time, which makes it one of the best and most reliable personality tests in history. However, this test is sadly not available to the public and needs to be referred by a qualified psychologist in person. It consists of 567 true or false questions and takes approximately 60 to 90 minutes to complete. Now, onto a personality test you might know, the Myers-Briggs Type Indicator. The MBTI is by far the most popular personality test around the world. It is a self-report questionnaire that you can take online and that indicates how people perceive the world and make decisions. It was developed by Catherine Cook Briggs and her daughter Isabel Briggs Myers and first published in 1944 under the name of Briggs-Myers Type Indicator Handbook. Catherine Briggs lived a life as a self-taught passionate in psychology after having graduated from Swarthmore College in the United States. When the Swiss psychiatrist and psychoanalyst Carl Jung published his book originally named Psychologische Typen, that was later translated from German to Psychological Types, Briggs was captivated. She took to heart the job to reinterpret the concepts in Jung's books in a simpler and more comprehensive way, adding some of her own theories and observations to it. She was then joined by her daughter in creating the now famous personality test, which is composed of 93 questions and 16 possible results. One result is made from 4 letters that represents categories of 2 choices. The first letter decides how you direct and receive energy. You can either get E for extroversion, where you focus more on the outside world and gain energy from interacting with people and taking action, or I for introversion, where you rather prefer to focus on your inner world and take some time alone to reflect on your experiences. Then, the second letter determines how you take in information. People who have an S for sensing tend to pay attention to the practical side of things and usually focus on what is in the present, while people who have an N for intuition are more imaginative, open-minded, and seek answers for all their questionings. The third letter represents how you make decisions and come to conclusions. You can either have a T for thinking, where you prefer to logically analyze a situation and prioritize rationality and efficiency over emotion. In the contrary, someone who has an F for feeling prefers to consider what is important to the people involved, are less competitive, and prioritize the harmony of everyone to the success of the end product. Finally, the fourth letter reflects one's approach on work and planning. Individuals who receive a J for judging are highly organized and thrive in a structured and predictable environment, while people who get a P for perceiving excel in improvising and working on the spot in a more flexible way. There has also been added 2 more possibilities of letters after the 4 basic letters that qualify your MBTI personality types, which are the A for assertive and T for turbulent. Assertive people are self-assured, resistant to stress, and refuse to worry too much about little things, while turbulent people are usually way more self-conscious, sensitive to stress, and experience a wide range of emotions. However, considering the validity of this test, it is criticized as pseudoscience, which consists of both scientific and factual statements, but that are incompatible with official scientific methods. This is why it is not widely endorsed in scientific research. Like the Myers-Briggs Personal Inventory, the 16 Personality Factor Questionnaire, otherwise known as the 16 PF test, is a self-report personality test. This test was developed by Raymond B. Cattell and published in 1949 after several years of research using advanced scientific studies techniques such as the factor analysis or psycholexical studies technique on Cattell's part. His studies concluded that the essence of human personality is based on language. Therefore, the results of the test consist of particular adjectives that embrace the description of an individual's character. After answering 185 true or false questions on daily concrete situations, you will be granted with statistics representing your level of accordance with 16 different scales. These scales are the following: warmth, reasoning, emotional stability, dominance, liveliness, rule consciousness, social boldness, sensitivity, vigilance, abstractedness, privateness, apprehension, openness to change, self-reliance, perfectionism, and tension. High scores in warmth represent the tendency of someone to be outgoing, caring, and attentive to others, while lower scores represent more reserved, impersonal, and detached people. For reasoning, people with high scores prefer abstract thinking and have a higher mental capacity than people who have a lower score, who prefer thinking concretely about real-life present problems. High scores in the emotional stability scale are for mature, adaptive, and emotionally stable people, while low scores are for people who are more easily affected by emotions and who are easily upset. With dominance, high scores represent dominant, assertive, and competitive people, in comparison to low scores, which represent accommodating and cooperative people. Liveliness is how much energy someone displays, which means high scorers are energetic and carefree, and that low scorers are more serious and self-restrained. People who score high in rule consciousness tend to be dutiful, conforming, and moralistic, while people who score low tend more to disregard rules and are non-conforming. For social boldness, high scores mean confident and bold people, while low scores mean shy, timid, and reserved people. Someone with high sensitivity tends to be artistic, sentimental, and intuitive, whereas someone with low sensitivity tends to be rough, practical, and unsentimental. High scores in vigilance are usually watchful, distrustful of others, and constantly on alert, while low scores are trusting, accepting, and innocent. One who has a high score in abstractedness is imaginative and absent-minded, while one who has a low score is grounded, practical, and solution-oriented. High scorers in the privateness scale can be seen as discreet and reluctant to disclose information about themselves, while low scorers can be seen as open, genuine, and honest. For apprehension, high scorers tend to be riddled with self-doubt, worried and insecure, while low scorers tend to be more unworried and unbothered by small things. Concerning the openness to change scale, high scores represent someone's tendency to be explorative of new approaches, while low scores represents their tendency to be traditional and attached to familiar. High scores in self-reliance are often resourceful and self-sufficient, while on the contrary, low scores often depend on others and are group-oriented. On perfectionism's side, high scores are for people who are well-organized, attentive to detail, and have high expectations of themselves, whereas low scores are for people who are tolerant of disorder, undisciplined, and careless of social rules. Finally, with tension, high scorers tend to be impatient, frustrated, and easy to anger, while low scorers are more relaxed, patient, and tolerant people. The 16 Personality Factor Questionnaire is today sometimes used by other psychologists to measure one's mental state and to help find what type of treatment would be the most adequate to their case, and occasionally also in career counseling. The California Personality Inventory, or California Psychological Inventory, is also a self-report inventory that was created by Harrison G. Goff in 1956. It was published by the Consulting Psychologist Press Company, today known as the Myers-Briggs Company. This test is very similar to the Minnesota Multiphasic Personality Inventory that I have previously talked about, as it shares multiple questions. However, what differentiates the two is that its CPI was created to focus on people's common knowledge of psychology concepts and what they perceive in the world around them, instead of aiming for clinical diagnoses. The test consists of 434 true or false questions that are scored on 18 different scales, which includes the 3 validity scales. These 18 scales are grouped in 4 clusters, each of which measures different aspects. The first cluster measures poise, ascendancy, self-assurance, and interpersonal adequacy. The second cluster measures socialization, responsibility, interpersonal values, and character. The third cluster measures someone's achievement potential and intellectual efficiency. And the fourth cluster measures intellectual modes and interest modes. The California Personality Inventory is especially popular among the people because of its non-clinical view on the concepts covered. Despite that, this way of determining personality is still considered as quite reliable thanks to its validation scales and basis in large amounts of research. The Big 5 Personality Test, otherwise known as the 5-Factor Model of Personality, or the Ocean Test, consists of 5 major traits that group personality characteristics. This test was developed by a group of people over many decades, starting in 1949 by D.W. Fisk, who developed the theory after the publishing of the 16 PF Questionnaire, from which the Big Five is deeply inspired. Then it was perfected by Ernest Tupes and Raymond Kurzweil in 1967, along with many other researchers who wanted to elaborate even more on the theory of the 16 PF Questionnaire, that personality traits came from the lexical language, by reducing the 16 ways of defining personality to only 5. Later, Louis Goldberg published the test in 1981 under the name that is known as today. Finally, in the following years, Paul Costa and Robert McRae have also been credited for the advancing of the personality test, and their work helped popularizing and establishing the Big Five as a widely accepted framework in the personality psychology. This test is a self-assessment, so it can be taken online by answering a series of questions by determining if a certain statement applies to you. The results consist of 5 primary personality traits that each represent a range between 2 extremes. The 5 traits are openness, conscientiousness, extraversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism, and are often referred as the ocean traits. The openness trait, also known as the openness to experience, is characterized by one's level of imagination, insight, and capacity to appreciate art. High scorers tend to be very creative, open to try out new things, and like to think about abstract concepts, while low scorers dislike change and new experiences and are less imaginative. The conscientiousness is defined by self-discipline and impulse control. High conscientiousness is often perceived as being more organized, prepared, and paying attention to detail, while low consciousness is perceived as a tendency to dislike structure and schedule, to procrastinate, and to not mind living in a mess. Extroversion determines how excitable, sociable, and talkative someone is. High scores often mean someone enjoys being the center of attention, is at ease in social situations, and gains energy from being around other people. In the contrary, low scores mean someone often prefers solitude, dislikes making small talk, and being in the center of attention. The agreeableness trait reflects the degree to which a person is cooperative, empathetic, and considerate to others. People who receive a high score feel great amounts of empathy and concern for other people, tend to put the happiness of other people before their own, and enjoy assisting others who are in need of help, while people who have a lower score take little interest in others and their problems, do not care about hurting others' feelings, and tend to manipulate others to get what they want. And finally, the neuroticism trait measures emotional stability and the tendency to experience negative emotions. Individuals who score high tend to experience a lot of stress, get upset easily, and worries about many different things, although individuals who score low are considered as more emotionally stable and relaxed, deal well with stress, and rarely feel sad or depressed and don't worry much. Finally, the last test I will cover in this essay is the Enneagram or Enneagram personality. This test is made of 9 distinct and interconnected personality types, each with their own set of characteristics, motivations, and coping mechanisms. This test's origins are unclear, but most researchers trace it back to the South American philosopher Oscar Ichazo in the 1950s and to the Chilean psychologist Claudio Naranjo in the 1970s. According to their theory, everyone emerges from childhood with a dominant personality type, which determines the way in which a child adapts to their environment and sees the world. This basic personality type is mainly determined by genetics and does not change with age. This type falls into one of the 9 categories of traits that are represented by an Enneagram figure, hence the name. Each personality type is determined by a number and a name. Type 1s are the reformers or the perfectionists. They are principled and responsible, have a strong sense of what is right and wrong, and strive to improve themselves and the world around them. They fear being corrupt, but are motivated by this desire to be right and to approve. Type 2s are known as the helpers, and they are nurturing, caring, and empathetic people. They seek to be loved and appreciated and often express their love by helping and supporting other people. Their biggest fear is being unworthy of love, so they often do things for others because of their need to feel loved, needed, and appreciated. Type 3s are the achievers. They are success-oriented, ambitious, and image-conscious. They value achievement and strive to present a successful image to others. They fear the feeling of worthlessness and are motivated by the want to be affirmed and the need to distinguish themselves from others. Type 4s are the individualists. They are creative, sensitive, introspective, unique, and empathetic. They seek authenticity and depth in their life and relationships. 4s may struggle with the fear of not having any personal significance, or in other words, of being ordinary. They desperately want to stand out from others and form their own unique person. Type 5s, the investigators, are very analytical, observant, and knowledge-seeking. They value privacy and autonomy and like to withdraw from the world to focus on developing complex ideas and skills. Their basic fear is of being useless or incapable, so they strive to be competent by needing to have everything figured out as a way of defending themselves from the threats in the environment. Type 6 are known as the loyalists. They are security-oriented, responsible, and loyal. They seek safety and often anticipate potential problems to prepare for them, which causes a lot of anxiety. They fear being in a situation where they lack support and guidance, and their role is to have security and support of others. Type 7s are the enthusiasts. They are fun-loving, spontaneous, and optimistic. They seek new experiences but struggle with impatience and impulsiveness. They fear being uncomfortable and in pain, so they strive to live a satisfied and content life, with all their needs fulfilled and freedom maintained. Type 8 are the challengers. They are assertive, protective, and authoritative. They value control and may assert themselves to avoid vulnerability. Their fear is of being harmed and controlled by others, so they need to feel like they are in control of their own life and destiny by being self-reliant and dominating their environment. Finally, Type 9s, the peacemakers, are easygoing, agreeable, and seek harmony. They value inner and outer peace and avoid conflict, but tend to be too willing to go along with others in order to maintain the peace. They fear loss and separation, so they need to have an inner stability and to live in harmonious environments. Each personality type is meticulously placed in the Enneagram so that they can be separated into 3 different categories or centers, like the instinctive center, the feeling center, and the thinking center. Each type can also be separated according to their dominant emotions, such as anger or rage, shame, and fear. The Enneagram is also carefully made so that it is possible to notice an internal structure within each personality type. The inner lines of the Enneagram connect the types according to how a person of a certain type behaves when under stress and how they behave when they are in a healthy state of mind. For example, when a type 6 is positively growing and in a healthy state of mind, they tend to act like a type 9, which means that they will avoid conflict and sacrifice too much in order to keep the harmony. However, if the type 6 is feeling stressed and endangered, they will tend to act more like a type 3 by being success-oriented and strive for perfection. Today, like many others, this personality test is often used in the workplace to help gain insight on different people's dynamics. However, the test has been categorized as pseudoscience because of its inability to be tested scientifically. In conclusion, a multitude of personality tests have been invented and published throughout history. This proves that the desire of humans to categorize their self is quite present across the world. Scientists and psychologists have used their creativity to find numerous ways to define the human mind, and this all the way from antiquity to today. Some of these ways are largely based on science of the brain, while others are more dependent on interpretation and life experiences. However, each are unique in their own way and can be helpful for people to understand themselves and others. Apart from the 8 main personality tests I mentioned, many other reliable and interesting tests exist that I couldn't mention, such as the DISC personality test, the Byrne-Reuter personality inventory, the Hum-Wadsworth temperament scale, the Kirsch temperament, or even the Berkman method. If personality tests are something that interests you and that you would wish to gain a deeper understanding of your own personality and how you interact with the world around you, I encourage you to take one of the self-assessments mentioned in this video. You might discover something interesting about yourself, but then again, take everything with a grain of salt since the majority of these tests are made with pseudoscience and cannot have a deeper understanding of your personality than you do yourself.